Analyzing the chords of a song is a really great way to understand concepts in music theory. So that's what we're going to do today. In this lesson, we're going to be talking about a bunch of different topics. We're going to be talking about secondary dominance, the harmonic minor scale, the natural minor scale, dominant chord function, diatonic chords versus non-diatonic chords. We're going to be talking about a lot of different subjects. I'm going to be demonstrating mostly on piano just to explain the theory stuff a little better. We're also going to be talking about chord inversions a little bit too, specifically on piano. That is it. Let's get to it. In the song I chose, there are two sections. In the first section, we could call it the verse. All of the chords are diatonic, so it's relatively simple. But in the bridge, we have a non-diatonic chord, so it gets a little more complicated. When we get to that non-diatonic chord, we're going to be analyzing minor scales, such as the harmonic minor scale, and comparing it to the natural minor scale. So if you feel you're a little more advanced and you want to jump ahead to that section, I do have timestamps in the description below. But we're going to start with the verse and analyze those chords, which, as I said, are purely diatonic. Now, what are diatonic chords? You can think of diatonic chords as just a family of chords that are connected to a key. So this song is in C major, the key of C major. So we are going to first just go through the diatonic chords of C major. So these are sort of like the close-knit family of chords that are related to C major. Those chords are C major, D minor, E minor, F major, G major, A minor, and B diminished. And as you can see, in order to play these chords, I'm just taking my hand and I'm moving it in the same chord shape up the piano. I'm only playing white keys on the piano. No, there are no sharps or flats in these diatonic chords, okay? And diatonic chords are made out of notes within the scale. So a C major scale, since we're in the key of C, a C major scale is just C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, right? Notice how they're all white keys. So I started on the root of the scale, which is C. And then I'm just gonna take these shapes, move it up to this chord, and this happens to be a D minor. I move it up again, happens to be an E minor, move it up again, it's now an F major, then a G major, then an A minor, and then B diminished, okay? Now I have videos that go into great detail about diatonic chords, so if you're still confused about what they are, I definitely recommend going to watch those videos because I explain them in just way more detail. But for the sake of time, I'm not going to do that in this video, okay? So go watch those videos if you still don't know what diatonic chords are. If you do, then let's carry on here. Now you can follow along with this lesson on any instrument. I do have printable PDF downloads of the song chart, and I also have a little PDF that explains the more complex theory behind the bridge section of this song. So go check those out if you want to download those PDFs. Definitely will make it easier to follow along in this video. So the song we're analyzing today is Can't Help Falling in Love with You, okay? So we start with the chord C major. So I've got a C, E, G, and this is the one chord, the diatonic one chord, right? And then I go to the 3 chord, which in the key of C major is E minor, right? So an E minor chord is E, G, and B, right? So there's my E minor. So as you see, to get from the C major to the E minor, all I have to do is move my thumb down to that note B. Wise men, right? And then I get to the 6th chord, which is A minor. What notes are in an A minor? We have A, C, and E. So I can move up here to A, C, E. So to go from the E minor to the A minor, all I have to do is move my thumb from B to C, and then my pinky from G to A. So like this. Wise men say only, okay? And then we get to the 4 chord, which is an F. So the notes in an F major chord are F, A, and C. So I can keep my pinky on that A. I'm gonna move my middle finger up to the F, and I can keep my thumb on the C. So I'm only moving one finger to get from A minor to F major. Pretty easy, right? All right, so this is my F chord. Only fools. Then we go back to the 1 chord, which is C. So I can bring these 2 fingers down. Rush. And then I go to G major, which is B, D, and G. Okay, so let's just go over that first part, okay? So, wise men say only fools rush in. Got it? If I were to go through these chords with Roman numerals, I have 1 chord, 3 chord, let's just quickly talk a little bit about chord inversions. For instance, if I'm going from C major to E minor, I could, if I were just doing all the chords in root position, this is what it would look like. C major, E minor, A minor, F major, C major, G major. See, I had to jump all over the place, right? My hand was just moving around, and it didn't really sound that musical, right? It doesn't really sound that smooth and cohesive, okay? Because I'm just moving around so much. So the beauty of inverting chords is that, well, when you do any kind of chord inversion, it changes the sound of the chord. So we do chord inversions just to get new and fun colors and sounds out of the chords. But we also invert chords just because it's less movement for our hands. So check it out. When I go from C major to E minor, the way I showed you in the beginning, just going like this, that is so much smoother and slicker than going, right? And it sounds better. The most important thing to know about chord inversions is all that matters is what is the lowest note in the chord. That is what chord inversions are all about, okay? So for instance, I'll just quickly explain. So C major, if I'm playing it like this, if C is the lowest note in the chord, then it's in what we call root position, okay? Because the C is the root note of a C major chord, okay? So we're in root position. Root is just the note that is in the name of the chord, okay? It doesn't matter if I'm playing the G like this and then the E on top. So if I switch the order of, so this, right now this is C, E, G, but if I played it C, G, E like that, so instead of E, G, I'm doing G, E, it doesn't matter. It's still root position C major. Still in root position because C is the lowest note. So all that matters is what note is lowest. That's what defines the inversion, okay? So this would be C major root position. Now, if E is the lowest note, then it becomes C major first inversion. Again, it doesn't matter what the other notes are, the order of the other notes. So I could have this, and this is a C major first inversion because E is the lowest note, okay? I could change it and go like this. It still is a C major first inversion because that E note is the lowest. Now, if G is the lowest note in the chord, like this, now we're in C major second inversion, okay? So if G is the lowest note, it's a second inversion. Again, it doesn't matter the order of the notes, as long as G is the lowest note, it is C major second inversion. So to play a C major chord, all you have to play are the notes C, E, and G. C, E, and G. Doesn't matter what order you play them in, doesn't matter how many of each note you have. As long as you're playing those three notes, C, E, and G, in any order on any instrument, you are playing a C major chord. But we can invert it and put the notes in different orders, stack them in different orders, and that is the fun of inversions. And if we had, let's say, a C major 7 chord, which is C, E, G, B, okay, so now we're not just playing a regular C major, but we're playing a C major 7 chord. We added that B in. Now, if B is the lowest note in the chord, like this, now I'm playing C major third inversion, okay? So if that B note is the lowest note, now it's a third inversion, okay? That is all that inversions mean when it's first inversion, second inversion, third inversion, root position. If the root note is the lowest note in the chord, it's root position. If that second note in the chord is the lowest note, then it's first inversion. The third note is the lowest note, it's second inversion. And if that fourth note is the lowest note, then it is third inversion. Got it? I'm sort of addressing this in a little detail because one of my Patreons recently asked me, what's the point of inversions? So this little answer is for you. You can see on the piano that makes it a lot easier to just go wise man from C to E minor instead of like that, C to E minor, all in root position. It just doesn't sound as good and it's harder to play. Anyway, let's carry on. Now we are already halfway through the verse, so let's just finish it. We have wise men say only fools rush in, but... And then we go to the 4 chord, okay, which is F major. So the notes in F major are F, A, and C. So we can move this pinky up to A, my middle finger to F, and my thumb to C. But I... And then G major, which is the 5 chord. Can't... And then the sixth chord, which is A minor. So notes in A minor are A, C, E. So help, and then 4 chord again, which is F major. Falling in 1 chord, which is C. The 5, which is G, with back to the 1 chord, which is C. You. Okay. Now, if you're looking at those PDFs, you'll see that one of the charts is just the chords, like says C, E minor, A minor, with the lyrics all written out with sheet music. So C, E minor, A minor, blah, blah, blah. It has the chord names. Then you'll see there's another PDF that has it written out with Roman numerals where it says 1, 3, 6, 4, 1, 5, with the Roman numerals. And then I also have a chord chart where it's written out in the key of D major. So you could practice playing it in different key as well, just reading the chords. So you have different options to practice with, and I recommend practicing with all of them. And it's really good to just try to read that Roman numeral chart and not try to read the chord chart if you can with the chord names, because if you read it with the Roman numerals, you're just going to be practicing the sort of that tagging of the sounds of the chords, and that's so good to train your ears thinking, what does a 1 to a minor 3 sound like? That's a minor 3, then to the minor 6, to the 4, to the 1, to the 5. It's just very good to be listening to that and thinking about what are those chords as Roman numerals. It's just going to help you train your ear so that you can play in different keys more easily. You'll be able to memorize music more easily. You'll be able to pick up songs on the fly more easily. You'll be able to improvise more easily. Everything will just get easier if you have trained ears that can just hear these chord progressions as Roman numerals. Okay. Now, the verse then just repeats exactly the same thing again. So I don't know if we need to really go through it again, but same chords. So now we get to the bridge. So this is the tricky part, okay? So this is where we suddenly have a non-diatonic chord. So up until this point, every single chord was a diatonic chord. It was one of those 7 chords that's in the family of C major, right? So nothing out of the ordinary, pretty easy to figure out. But now when we get to the bridge, we have an E minor. Well, tell me, what inversion is this? So this is an E minor chord, and I'm playing it as B, E, G. Is that root position? Well, let's think. What are the notes in an E minor chord? E, G, B, right? If I were playing it in root position, it's E, G, B, okay? But I'm playing B, E, G. So let's think about this. The lowest note in the chord is B. So it's not root position, because it would have to be E if it was root position. If it were first inversion, the lowest note would have to be G, right? So it's not first inversion. It's in second inversion because B is the lowest note in the chord, okay? So I'm playing E minor in second inversion, and the reason why I'm doing that is because then it'll be easier for me to get to the next chord. Now, E minor is totally diatonic, right? E minor is part of the world of C major, right? E minor is the 3rd chord in C major. So it's a diatonic chord. Nothing weird about that E minor chord. But then, after E minor, we go to B7. And B7 is not a diatonic chord in the key of C major. So that is where things get a little interesting. To play the B7, I'm just playing B, D sharp, F sharp, A. So I'm playing that in root position. So I'm going from E minor second inversion to B7 root position, okay? Like a river flows. And we were going back and forth between these 2 chords for several times. Surely to the sea, darling, so it goes. Something. We go to C major, and then A minor, arm into D minor, B, back to G major, okay? So all the rest of the chords in the bridge are diatonic chords, right? After going back and forth between the E minor and the B7, then we just have C, A minor, D minor, and G. Those are all diatonic chords. So really there's only one chord in this entire song, which is B dominant 7, or also known as B7. Its full name is B dominant 7. That is the only chord in the song that is not diatonic. So what on earth is it doing there? Let's discuss and figure it out. Okay, so the song is in C major, but we've gotten to the bridge, and it's a little weird because now we suddenly have a B7 chord. And B7 is not one of the diatonic chords of C major, right? So the diatonic chords of C major
I'm just going to write them out here so you can see. So 1 chord is always a major chord, 2 is always minor, 3 is minor, 4 is major, 5 is major, 6 is minor, and 7 is diminished, okay?
So the diatonic chord is B diminished, but we have a B7 in the song. We don't have a B diminished, we have a B7. So this is our non-diatonic chords. So what on earth is B7 doing in the song? Well, so in the bridge, it's going back and forth between E minor and B7, E minor and B7. Now, when I hear about the notes E or B hanging out together, I instantly think of the 1 and 5 relationship, because in the key of E major, let's not even talk about E minor, but just E major. Let's think about an E major scale.
E, F sharp, G sharp, A, B, C sharp, D sharp. Okay? And if we were to number these, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, okay?
What is the 5 chord of E major? It's B. So E and B have a very powerful relationship with each other because B is the 5th degree of E, okay? B is the dominant for E, okay? So right off the bat, when I hear that the chords are going E minor to B7, I'm thinking, okay, well, this is a 1-5 situation going on. That's what's happening, right? Now, why, though, is it exactly B7 and E minor? Because, we're talking about E major right now. I'm talking about I just wrote out an E major scale. I didn't write out an E minor scale. And the chords are E minor to B7. So let's analyze an E minor scale really quickly. Okay, so I just wrote out an E natural minor scale. So the notes in an E natural minor scale are E, F sharp, G, A, B, C, and D, okay? So it sounds like this. E, F sharp, G, A, B, C, D, E, okay? That's our E natural minor scale. And then these are the diatonic chords of E natural minor. We have an E minor, so that's the first chord, that's the 1 chord. And the notes in an E minor chord are E, G, B. So I broke down each chord into the notes that it is, okay? So E minor is E, G, B, okay? And then the next chord is F sharp diminished, which is F sharp, A, and C. Okay, then we have a G major, which is G, B, and D. That's the 3rd chord. Then A minor is A, C, E. Then B minor is B, D, F sharp. Then we have C major, which is C, E, G. Then we have D major, which is D, F sharp, A. So these are the 7 diatonic chords in E natural minor. Now, if you look, our 5th degree in E natural minor is B minor. But in this bridge, we are going to B7, right? We're not going to B minor. We're going from E minor to B7, E minor to B7. We're not going E minor to B minor. So I know that we're not pulling this minor chord from the E natural minor scale, but we have, there are a bunch of different minor scales, but there are 3 main minor scales. That is the natural minor scale, the harmonic minor scale, and the melodic minor scale. And I have some videos that break down those scales into intense detail that you can watch in the description below if you're curious. But stick with me here for now. So do you remember how to play a harmonic minor scale? It is just like the natural minor scale, except it has a raised 7th, okay? So the 7th note in the scale, which is D, is going to be raised by a half step, so it's going to turn into D sharp. So I'm going to write out the E harmonic minor scale now, okay? Okay, so I just wrote out an E harmonic minor scale. So it has that raised 7th. So we have E, F sharp, G, A, B, C, D sharp instead of a D. After I recorded and edited most of this video, I realized I made 2 really stupid typos on this whiteboard. So I'm letting you know right now because I cannot re-record and re-edit this video. So I do catch one of the typos later on in the video. But anyway, this B major chord is supposed to be an uppercase 5 because it's a major chord. So that Roman numeral should be uppercase 5. And this D sharp diminished should be a lowercase 7, like that. Okay? So, my bad. So I'll cut back and you'll see that it's written wrong. But this is what it's supposed to be. I'm really sorry about the typo. I think I'm just a little brain dead with my toddler and baby at the moment. Anyway, back to the video. And these are the diatonic chords in E harmonic minor, okay? So some of them are the same and some of them are different from the natural minor, right? E minor stayed the same, F sharp diminished stayed the same, but now we have a G augmented instead of a G major, because see, in G major we have GBD, because we have a D natural in the natural minor scale, but here we have GB sharp, because we have a D sharp in the E harmonic minor scale. So since we have that D sharp, now we have a G augmented chord instead of a G major chord. A minor is the same, Okay, here we have a different chord as well. So in the natural minor, we had a B minor, but in the E harmonic minor, we have a B major chord, okay? Why do we have B major chord? Because we have B D sharp F sharp instead of B D natural F sharp. So again, because we have that D sharp note, it goes from B minor to B major, okay? Then C major is the same, right? But then here again, we have a different chord. We have a D major chord with E natural minor, but we have a D sharp diminished chord with the E harmonic minor. Again, just because we have a D sharp instead of a D natural. So let me play those chords for you so you can hear the difference, okay? So the ones that are different are the third chord. We had a G B D, which is G major, but it turned into G B D sharp, which is a G augmented chord. The next difference is that B minor turned into a B major. So we had B minor, which is B, D, F sharp, but we now have B major, which is B, D sharp, F sharp, B major. So we went from B minor to B major. And then last but not least, instead of D major, which is D, F sharp, A, now we have D sharp diminished, which is D sharp, F sharp, A. Versus, okay, so 3 different chords. Now things are getting interesting because now we're much closer to that B7 that I was looking for, right? Because in the song we go from E minor to B7. We go back and forth between those chords. And B7, that is a major chord. That's not a minor chord. B7 is a major chord. The notes in B7 are B, D sharp, F sharp, and A. Those are the 4 notes that we need to play a B7 chord. So B, D sharp, F sharp, and A. And as you can see, we have the 3 main notes that we need, B, D sharp, and F sharp, in just a B major chord. So B7 is a type of major chord. It's just getting a little fancier. We're adding that A on top, okay? So actually, B7 is the dominant chord for E harmonic minor. And when I say dominant, I mean the 5th. So the 1 to the 5 right here that I've been talking about, 1 to 5, that's very important, that relationship. The 5 is what we call the dominant, okay? So B, whether it's B major or B7, it's still the dominant, okay? I actually have a video that talks even more about why sometimes we use B7 instead of B major in that dominant chord function. I think that video will definitely help you clear things up if you're confused about that, so watch that. I will link that as well in the description below. But we'll talk a little bit about it right now. So basically, B major and B dominant 7, they're both like forms of B major. And they're oftentimes even interchangeable with each other. Not all the time, but oftentimes you can swap them out and the chord still sounds good. So they're serving the same harmonic function. They're both serving that dominant function. And if you were to turn all of these diatonic chords into 7th chords, so right now they're all triads. A triad is a chord with 3 notes in it. So B major is a triad because it's just got B, D sharp, and F sharp. If I wanted to turn it into a 7th chord, I would just jump over 1 more third and add in an A as well. Okay? So then I would have B, D sharp, F sharp, and A. I would have a B7 chord. Okay? So if I were writing out the harmonic minor diatonic chords as 7th chords, I would have a B7, a B dominant 7, not just a B major, but a B dominant 7. So B7 is totally the dominant chord of E harmonic minor. We can be very clear about that, and we can say, okay, so, we were asking earlier in this video, where on earth is that B7 coming from? Why do we have a B7 in the song? Well, it's because basically in the song, during this bridge section, we're temporarily modulating to the key of E minor. That's what we're doing. We're modulating temporarily, we're sort of leaving the world of C major. The song was in C major, but now suddenly we're sort of moving into the world of E minor, and we're playing 1-5, 1-5 within the key of E harmonic minor. See, 1-5, 1-5, E minor, B7, E minor, B7. That's what we're doing, okay? And look, just to sort of prove my point, if I were just to play E minor to B major and not E minor to B7, so just E minor to regular old B major, so just triads, listen to it. Like the sounds good as B major, right? It sounds maybe a little more full as a B7 chord. Like the river flows. But if I do just a B major chord, it's getting the point across, right? The harmony is still doing its thing, and it's going back and forth between 1 and 5. So that's what I mean when I say the 5 chord, whether it's a B7 or just a B major, it's really just serving the same function, whether you're using the triad or the 7th chord form, okay? So now that we know we're pulling the B7 from the E Harmonic Minor world, how would we write these chords as Roman numerals within the song that's in C major? So we have E minor and B7 are the 2 chords. Now we're going to think about the broader context of the whole song. The whole song is in C major, even though I said we're temporarily modulating to E minor or E harmonic minor. The whole song is in C major overall. So when we write out the Roman numerals of the song in context of the key of C major, how would we write E minor and B7 as Roman numerals? This is what we would do. We would call E minor just a regular a lowercase 3 minor. So whenever it's a minor chord, we always write lowercase Roman numerals. That's why this is a lowercase 1. A diminished chord is a type of minor chord, so that's lowercase. Since an augmented chord is a major chord, it's a type of major chord, we have it capitalized 3. Since it's a minor chord, it's a lowercase 4. You see that? Ignore this for a split second, right? If we're thinking about the key of C major, just if in case you're confused what I'm doing right now, in fact, I'm going to even draw a line here just to make this totally separate thought. All right, I'm think back to C major now. So C major, this is our C major scale, right? E minor is the 3rd of C major, right? E minor, that's the 3rd diatonic chord in C major. So E minor, we're going to write it as just a lowercase 3, okay? Now for B7, how are we gonna write that Roman numeral? Well, what we're gonna do is we're gonna write it as the 5. Whoops, oh, I made a little mistake here. Let me fix it. That's supposed to be an uppercase 5. My bad. Glad I caught that now before the video ended. So that is supposed to be an uppercase 5 because it's a B major chord, okay? For B7, we are going to write 5 of 3. So what on earth does that mean? That means that it's the 5th degree of the 3rd. So can you comprehend that, what I'm saying? It's the 5th degree. It's the 5th degree. So the 3rd is what? The 3rd is E minor. In the world of C major, E minor is the 3rd, right? See, 3rd, E minor. And the 5th degree, then we're going to go to E minor. The 5th degree of E minor is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, B7. And just to be really specific about what kind of B, because if we wrote this as a lowercase v, then this would be B minor, okay? But we want to indicate that we're not going to use the E natural minor scale, we're going to use the E harmonic minor scale. So we're going to write a capital V, so it's capital number 5, and we can even write a 7 next to it if we want to indicate that it's a B7, just to be really clear about which chord. We want a B7, so I'm going to write a capital 5 with a 7, so it's the 5 of 3, okay? So it's the 5th degree of the 3rd degree. I know that might be a little hard to comprehend, but hopefully you follow along. Again, if you're still confused about this, I do have a video that breaks this down into much greater detail. This is a concept of what we call secondary dominance. So B7 is not the dominant of C major, right? The dominant of C major is G, right? But a secondary dominant, it's like the dominant of another note, right? So B7 is the dominant of E minor. So it's the dominant, which is the 5th of the 3rd. So this is sort of what we refer to as secondary dominant stuff. I do have a video that talks about secondary dominance. I think I have a few actually at this point. But anyway, I will link that in the description below that breaks this concept down of secondary dominance into even more detail. So that is how we would write this as Roman numerals, and that is what's happening. It's really just a 1-5-1-5-1-5 movement happening, and it is the 5th degree, the dominant of the 3rd. And just to be extra specific, we are pulling it from the E Harmonic Minor scale instead of the E natural minor scale. Now, it's actually very common when people play the 5 of 3 that they pull from the harmonic minor scale instead of the natural minor scale. So it's very common to have this B major or this B7 going to E minor instead of the B minor. The last thing I want to talk about in this video is why B major or B7 is a stronger dominant chord than B minor, okay? So, and this is why you're going to often have this being pulled from the E harmonic minor scale instead of the E natural minor scale. Let's look at the movement between B minor to E minor versus B to E minor, okay? Okay, so first we're going to look at B minor to E minor. So this is like E natural minor world. We're going to compare B minor to E minor. So B minor, we have B, D, F sharp, okay? So to go from B minor to E minor, the F sharp goes up to the G, okay? The B can actually stay the same, and the D needs to go up a whole step to E, okay? So we have one whole step movement from D to E, and then we have one half step movement from F sharp to G, and then we have one note that stays the same, okay? So just like that. B minor to E minor. And that definitely has a good dominant function because, you know, we have that half step moving. So basically, let's just really quickly, dominant, the whole purpose of the dominant is to give us, create tension and want us to push us back home to the 1. So music's all about tension and resolution. And when we have the dominant chord, in this case B minor, I'll play it even a bit lower, there's tension that wants to resolve to that E minor, okay? And part of the reason why we have that tension is because of this half step. So because it's a half step, it's so close to that G, it just really wants to resolve to that G. So half steps always create a lot of tension. We refer to it as sort of a leading tone, right? This is a leading tone wanting to lead us to that note G, okay? So B minor, it has a dominant function. It's leading us back home to the tonic, which is E minor. It's doing a good job of that. But now let's compare B major to E minor as a dominant. So now we're looking at B major to E minor. So this is also going to serve a dominant function, but let's see if it's maybe even a stronger dominant chord, okay? So now we have B major, which is B, D sharp, F sharp, okay? And to go from B major to E minor, all right, well, the note B stays the same. The note F sharp goes up a half step to G, and then the note D sharp, all D sharp has to move is a half step to get to E. So do you see that? So I actually had 2 half step movements. So B stays the same, but then F sharp moves a half step to G, and D sharp moves a half step to E. So we have 2 notes that are moving a half step. So when we did the B minor, we had one note that's moving a half step, one note that's moving a whole step. But in B major, we have 2 notes that are moving just a half step, okay? So these 2 notes are moving a half step to resolve to E minor, okay? So that has even, I think, a stronger dominant function because we have now basically 2 leading tones pushing a half step away to get to the home base of E minor, right? So that creates an even stronger dominant function. So yeah, that is one reason why the B major or B7 is often pulled from the harmonic minor scale instead of the natural minor scale, because we have 2 notes that are a half step away instead of just one note that's a half step away. So we sort of have 2 leading tones that are pushing to resolve instead of just one. So it's like double the tension and resolution. Now let's compare B major to E minor versus B7 to E minor and compare those 2 dominant functions, okay? Okay, so these are the notes in a B7 chord. B, D sharp, F sharp, and A. Listen to it. B, D sharp, F sharp, A, okay? Now, when we have this dominant 7 chord, this is in all dominant 7 chords, we have a special thing happening right here, which is the tritone. It's a special interval, and I have a whole series on intervals if you want to learn more about intervals, but this D sharp to A is a tritone. And there is just so much, you can hear it's like a really like tense sounding interval, right? So because it creates a lot of tension, that tritone, that just automatically gives it a little oomph as a dominant chord. It gives its dominant function a little bit of oomph and power because, remember, we want to create tension with that dominant chord. So throwing that A in there, so here's B, D sharp, F sharp. That's just a regular B major chord. But then when we add the note A, there's even more tension, right? Because of that tritone interval just creates more tension in general, okay? So that's one reason why B dominant 7, the B7 chord, is sort of a stronger dominant chord choice than regular just B major. Another reason why B7 is oftentimes a stronger dominant chord choice is because let's say we weren't going from B7 to E minor, but we were going from B7 to E major, okay? I space these out a little bit more so we have a little more room. Okay, so these are the 4 notes in the B7 chord, okay? Now, what if we wanted to go to E major instead of E minor, okay? So let's look at the notes in an E major chord. So in an E major chord, the 3 notes are E, G, and B, okay? So, well, the B, that stays exactly the same, right? There's nothing that happens there. We can keep B, B stays on B. The note E, okay, check this out. To go from D sharp to E, it is just a half step, okay? So we have a half step movement there. And the 3rd note in an E major chord is G sharp, okay? So to go from A to G sharp, that is also a half step, okay? And I'll show you on the piano in a second. This is an arrow. Okay, so that's also a half step. Back when we were playing E minor, we had the note G instead of G sharp. And G, so if we were not playing G sharp, if we were playing, imagine this was E minor, G is a half step away from F sharp, right? But now since I'm having us check out E major, just for fun, this is why a B7 is an even stronger dominant chord choice than regular B major, because that A that we added on to the B7 chord is only a half step away from the note G sharp. Let me show you. So here is our B dominant 7 chord, and then to get to E major, I said the B stays the same, the D sharp moves a half step up to E, see? That's right here, D sharp moving a half step up to E, and then we can let go of the F sharp, and the A right here moves a half step to G sharp. So we go from here to here, from here to here, from B7 to E major. So we have 2 half step motions happening, this, and then that A is moving a half step to the G sharp. So that choosing B7 is definitely a very strong dominant chord choice if you're resolving to E major. Now in the context of the song that we were looking at, it just is resolving to E minor, so it's not as important in that context, but that tritone still gives it some extra tension as well. So I hope this was clear and easy to follow. If you were confused about it, let me know in the comments. I will definitely put in the description of this video a bunch of links to other videos that break down a lot of these topics that we touched on in more detail. So if you're confused at all, I definitely recommend checking those videos out. But I do kind of want to hear from you guys if you found this video to be too fast and hard to follow, or if it was a good pace and you were able to follow all of it. My guess is that if you couldn't follow it, you just need to do some more reviewing of some of my other videos. So again, I will link those in the description below because maybe some of these terms were new for you and so you got a little confused. And if that's the case, I think those other videos will really teach you a lot and then you'll be able to understand this much more easily. So hopefully you found this helpful. It's just more analysis of different minor scales, how we're using chords within them. We were doing some secondary dominant stuff with the 3 of 5 chord in the song. We were looking at diatonic chords as well as a non-diatonic chord, and we were just doing some fun old chord analysis of a song. So again, I have printable PDF handouts that I have the chord chart for the song we worked on with Roman numerals, the chord chart written out in the key of C, and the chord chart written out in the key of D major. And then I also have just a printable PDF that sort of goes through this information that we talked about in this video with the theory stuff. So just a sort of a review sheet, if you will. So yeah, hopefully you found this video helpful. If you're new to my channel, hello and welcome. My name is Gracie Terzian. I post videos here on YouTube. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please consider doing so. And if you liked this video, please definitely give it a thumbs up. Leave a comment to say, hey, it really helps my channel out a lot. And be sure to turn on the bell notifications so you know when I post new videos.